top of the morning to ya. I'm Liam the Leprechaun, and I've got a wee secret to share. ZJZDesigns.com has just unveiled their brand new St. Patrick's Day apparel. Featuring yours truly, of course. From cheeky tees to lucky prints, these designs are brimming with charm and plenty of gold. Whether you're heading to a parade or just feeling the Irish spirit, you look grand in these threads. So what are you waiting for? Skip the rainbow and head straight to ZJZDesigns.com. You'll find the pot of gold in your cart. No magic required. ZJZDesigns.com, where style is always in season.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some.
Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to the All About Nothing podcast. Happy New Year. It's 2026. Let's hope for certain that 2026 outshines 2025, because I think for a lot of us, we were desperate to get out of that year. This is episode number 288. I am Barrett Gruber, joined by Mr. Zach King. Hello, Zach. Happy New Year.
Hey, Barrett. How's it going?
It's going. It is going. Please subscribe and share the show. That's how we get new listeners. Also, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting theallaboutnothing.com and becoming an official member, proudly calling yourself a true nothinger. I have more details on that at the end of the show. If you can't do that, please give us a 5-star review, a like, and follow us across all social media. You can find links at theallaboutnothing.com. Hey, real quick before we get into it, we're going to have Brian Mays, and I'll introduce him again. He, of course, is the director of the Jackson Teen Center. We'll discuss some things going on there, as well as some current events. But it is 2026 now, and it is going to be an election in November. My hope is that we are going to have every single potential office filled with candidates running. That we don't have any of these seats in open elections, or possibly have anyone running unopposed. Our hope is that if you have any thoughts or desires of running for office, please do it. You know, even if you just pay the filing fees and have your name on the ballot. You know, campaigning is hard, but signing up is easy. So let's make sure everybody does it. All right. It is an honor to introduce Mr. Brian Mays to the show for the third time. He's a 3-timer now, known affectionately to his community as Mr. BB, a Charlotte native and U.S. Air Force veteran. Brian's journey has been defined by a deep commitment to service and inspiration. After 20 years career as a national gospel performer, he transitioned his focus to the heart of the community, serving for 2 decades as the Director of Family Life Outreach. Since 2014, he is the Director of the Jackson Teen Center. Brian has cultivated one of the most successful teen programs in the nation. Under his visionary leadership, the center boasts a staggering 90% rate of members transitioning into college or military service, whether through the initiative career training like the JET program or the high energy summer grind initiative. Brian remains a tireless mentor dedicated to changing the trajectory of young lives for the better. Welcome, Brian, to the show. And also, just to mention, it has been episodes since your last appearance. Or no, I guess not 73. You were on with us before the elections. But 215, I think, was the one where we spotlighted you in the program. How is it going?
It is going absolutely amazing, to be honest with you. There's been some things that have happened as far as our relationship with the Boys and Girls Clubs. But the journey is still awesome. I mean, anytime you're serving young people and you're able to watch, them moving on to the next level, our most notable person as of late is Joyce Edwards. And Joyce Edwards plays for USC women's basketball. But a lot of people don't know Joyce Edwards left here with about a 5.6 GPA. And I used to joke with her all the time. And I said, well, Joyce, I had a 5.6 too. She said, really, Mr. BB? I said, sure. I said, I added all of them up, 1.2 here, 1.5. And we get a good laugh out of that. But what people don't know, I think people look at some of our young people as just they're athletes and that's it. But they actually created a major for Joyce, because Joyce is just brilliant. I mean, she was a tutor throughout Making a Conversation program at Jackson, and which is a new name now. But she's we also have Gigi Jackson plays for the Memphis Grizzlies in the NBA, and so we've had some notable athletes. We also have some notable people like Jai Nunley, who was I think we talked about her last night. She was actually homeless 3 times. And but she is now a college graduate. She's a lieutenant in the United States Army. She graduated from Presbyterian College, but she's also um, um, in law police officer in Clinton, South Carolina. She stayed there. So there are some not famous names, so to speak, but there are definitely some young people um, that are serving our country. So we're still proud of that, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned to me, and I guess we're just going to jump right into it because you mentioned to me that you all are no longer affiliated with the Boys and Girls Club of America. Can we discuss what happened to that?
Okay. And of course, there's a lot of things going on because this just officially took place January 1, where we things are changing. Okay. I'm a firm believer that you have to continually be in with the young people to understand the new needs and the things that they need to do, or that they need to be successful and get them the proper tools. Sometimes, too often, we tell them what they need without asking. And myself and my wife, we're more about getting down in the dirt with young people and having a conversation with them. Hence, making a conversation, and come to find out that some of the things that we felt were important that the young people of Kershaw County and South Carolina, because we're in several other places. We've done Richland County as well, and going into Lexington County with making a conversation. We saw the needs and what young people were crying out for, and I did kind of several times, brought this up to the powers that be. This is what's going on. And some people did not want to change directions. I mean, you can't fix a 2026 problem with 1995 methods. It doesn't work that way anymore. We're dealing with now young people that a decision could be them going to college, going to the military, getting a good job, or picking up a gun, and what happens when that happens. So I began to have discussions about things like that, and um, so the way the Boys and Girls Club is structured is the Boys and Girls Club of America. Then, like McDonald's or anything, you have different franchise. We were actually a part of Boys and Girls Club of Crescent Region, which broke down to our board, which is Boys and Girls Club of Kershaw County. And Boys and Girls Club of Kershaw County are very involved. Those board members are very involved in everyday community, and they see firsthand what was going on. So I just think that we kind of a little bit took our eye off the mission. So I began to pressure about some things that we needed to fix in the community. And the nicest way to say it is it didn't go great. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that certainly happens, especially when you have what is an organization that for decades and decades has prided itself on its ability to organize and create programs that keep children off the streets and keep teenagers out of situations that would lead them down a potential path of harm and whatnot. Is there any, when it comes to the Boys and Girls Club, of course, they receive grants from the state, and then they also can receive grants from the federal government. Is there any role that is any of the change that you've seen in the Boys and Girls Club potentially related to current administrations or how things are going at the top, maybe?
Well, we took some children to Washington again since I've seen you guys, and one of the things they were fighting was immediately in this administration there was a pause or something with the 21st Century program. 21st Century has been approved, federal government. The thing about it is that Boys and Girls Club of America heavily relies on that 21st Century program. Serve some kids. One of the particular congressmen, and I won't do any name dropping today, but he's very good supporter of the teen center. And we went up and I talked to him and I said, dude, what gives? I'm up here on behalf of mostly children that I don't know, because we weren't relying on those programs. And one of the comments was, when you're fixing a problem, because I'm sure there was waste, or whatever. But when you're fixing a problem, and he was telling them, you fix it, with a scalpel, not with a butcher knife. So you take the butcher knife and you cut out the whole programs. What about those kids that really needed it? So we kind of talked talked through that, and of course, the 21st century was back in. Now, going back to Boys and Girls Club of America, um, to me, the core of Boys and Girls Club of America, and it's an important piece, are the younger children. That they're very structured. You come in, you do a homework, blah blah blah. Kind of very a very very structured environment. But when you're dealing with teens, or as we call them, pre-adults, when you're dealing with them and you look at, there's a book, and I got to get you guys a copy of it. It's called The You and Me. So the capital U and capital N, me. Basically what it is stories that the students, we went around and interviewing other students of Kershaw County. But we changed the names of everybody, but it turned into a mental health book when you start hearing some of the stories and the challenges that they're going through. One kid literally watched his father commit suicide in his face.
Gosh.
And I got to get you a copy of that book. That's the reality of what we're trying to do. What the work that I believe God has called me to do. And you're right. We depend on federal grant. Now, I may get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it, and I've said this in Washington. A person sitting behind the desk who never served, who has no empathy of what we're dealing with, should not be the person that makes the decision on where the funding goes. Because you don't know. You just don't know. Not anything bad about you. And that's Republican, Democrat. I personally am an independent. I think that I vote the best person, and I agree with you. I think that that we need some balance. So if you feel like running, I'll second that. You should be running. If you have the passion, and I should shut up because somebody told me to run for something, but I at this point I couldn't because of where I live. I
Commitments,
live in
yeah.
New Groff. I serve in Camden. Most of our funding that keeps us alive is in the Kershaw County area. So what that would have done for me is it'll take me out of being able, to lobby some of these
Yeah.
organizations to keep the center open. So mine is a different situation. I'm not going to sit back, go to the barbershop and talk about everything that's wrong in the country and then, don't do anything about it, or can't do anything about it, because the barbershop is where all the talk goes on. I had a guy in December. He came by and we were at the barbershop and he was very upset. And he said that he didn't think it was right for the Make It a Conversation program to talk to children early at 16 years old about policies and voting and Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever the case may be. We technically will not tell you who voted a policy, whether it was a Republican candidate, Democrat candidate, whoever. We just tell you the policy and this is what this is. And this came about when this brilliant young lady who is our president now, Caitlin, she's gifted and she was in the program at University of South Carolina. Gifted students went over there. And unfortunately, that was one of the first programs that got cut. Then all those students had to pay like, I don't know, $500, $600, $700 a month. And of course, she ended up out of the program. But we try to tell people that you got to be very, very careful. The thing about it is that if you're going to be a public servant, that if I can get in, put my religious hat on, Jesus said, I came to serve. So some people forget that we're only a stewardess over who we're supposed to be serving. And he said, you serve the least of these. And I think, like I said, once again, it seems like people just forget. In some cases, you look at the big picture and you'll say, this is good for the country and that is good for the country. And then Jesus said, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was in prison, you didn't come to me. And the disciples said, well, when did you do this? And he's talking about the everyday person, that we're supposed to be looking out for. We still, when we got we got a big chunk cut out of the state. We're making a conversation program. It didn't almost, if it wasn't for Kershaw County, then that program would no longer exist. And I thought that was very important. But going back to this guy at the barbershop, he kept complaining this and that. And I said, I said, you had 2 children that graduated from us, from our program. You pulled up, you blew the horn, you picked them up every day. I said, you never once came in. You never once came in and checked on us and said, hey, man, you guys okay? Or I'm just here to, whatever, And I said, and if you had an issue about a program that we're teaching, we take volunteers all the time. I love the rebuttal of having different opinions. So a kid, and he apologized. I didn't know y'all were going through that. And I think that's what some of the politicians, I have one that I want to call his name so bad, and I won't because, we can't do that. I can't do that in my position now. But maybe all you have to do is research it. I mean, he got all of his bills in, he got all of his stuff in, and I'm sure these are people that know out to the tunes of, hundreds of millions of dollars. And then he led the charge with cutting money from the state of South Carolina to nonprofits. How does that fit in the world? I got mine, but I'm going to cut yours. And you are right. Some people need to run for office and rebuttal, and that's whether you're Republican or Democrat, because I think you got good people on both sides. But the reality is you got some not so good people on both sides.
Yeah. And I'll just reiterate, because I've had several conversations where where I have been asked, what is the role of government? What is the point of having a government? And I say every single time that the government is here to provide and protect the people that occupy this space. I disagree with this idea of citizens versus non-citizens, that if the what seems to drive Democrats and Republicans apart is whether someone is an immigrant or an illegal immigrant or all these other things. But all in all, regardless of who you are, where you're from, what you look like, that the government of the United States, and even state governments down to local, town governments, those governments are there to provide for the people that live in that area in order to make their lives better. And I look at what's going on across city of Lexington or town of Lexington to Columbia to Lexington County and Richland County to the state of South Carolina to the federal government. I don't see any of these politicians in power.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the politicians that are not in power, because there's a difference between in power and not in power. And in South Carolina, if you're a Democrat, you're not in power. You are just, you're in office trying to fight. But I don't see any of these in power politicians doing anything currently to try and make the lives of the people they represent better. And that includes nonprofit organizations, because those nonprofit organizations are the ones that do the footwork of what the federal government can't do or the state government can't do. They can't bring in when we had the SNAP benefits ending back in October.
Correct.
The National Guard was sent as according to the news, they were there to help process and push and provide, carry food to cars and things like that. But in my mind, when General McMaster's stands there with Sheriff Lott, who is now in his militia outfit, not his Richland County Sheriff's Office, uniform. He's in his South Carolina militia uniform. That to me strikes as a threat. And in my head, and what a lot of other people pictured, was the South Carolina National Guard and the South Carolina State Militia standing with rifles guarding food pantries.
Yeah.
It's the way that our state and federal governments sort of present themselves, and by providing grants that they don't then cancel for nonprofits. Again, the nonprofits are what do all the footwork. They do all the legwork for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And one of the things that they do, and they do a very good job of it, is I spoke to a congressman last week, and we talked pretty regular. And he always said, he calls me Dr. Beebe, we have to help organizations like yours, and he named some others because we're definitely a small part of what's, of trying to fix some problems. But when you look at the news, then you're going to see what's going on with Minnesota, true or fact. I haven't researched it, but they claim they gave millions of dollars to this place and they're not serving any children. So it's a fight that we as a people, okay, we have to get smarter on what we listen to and how we fight back. Because my question would be is that how come that is shown over and over and over and over, right? But when someone does something, there was another organization in Colombia that were feeding, out of their pocket and blah blah blah. You saw that on the news one time, and so here's the catch to what it does is they give so little time, in my opinion, so little time to the people that are on the ground working. They give so little time to that, and then those people on the ground see that it's so little money till everybody begins to fight over that small money. And they're putting each other down. They're not looking. No organization is perfect. I don't care who they tell you they are. They're not perfect. There's some issues because you're fighting every day to change issues. But they begin to fight. So, well, that organization, they're not doing this and they're not doing that. And then people fight over so little while somebody else runs off and they grab the lion's share of the money and they get their things out. And that's kind of the way that worked. Going back to your point, I did not see that a particular picture or interview, but you got to think about this. We're part of this state of South Carolina. What image do you want to put in front of the people? I'm here with you. We're going to fight this together. Or you better do what I say because I'm in my militia outfit and you know what happens there. And so you're going to divide the people like that. And once you divide them and once they no longer trust you as far as in office, man, it's hard to get them back. I was there with Boys and Girls Club and I won't call this particular person's name in South Carolina. They were fighting for the 21st century. And they set me up at a meeting to go see this particular person in office. And I refused to go because I knew the way that person was going to vote. And I said, when you get there, and I wish I had my pictures loaded. I'd show you the pictures on my computer. I only went down there because I can't think of her name. Is it Shapiro? She saw one of my kids recognized her from Fox News and they started taking pictures. And then I left and it was like, I said, no, I'm not going in here to talk to an aide. When I already know this person has made it public that they were going to take, their stance was solid
Right.
on the 21st century. And we did a documentary long before I met you guys called I Am the Evidence, when a particular politician out of Rock Hill said there was no evidence that after school programs work. So we put all of the graduates and everybody said, I am the evidence. There's no evidence if you don't look. Like in a court of law, if you don't submit it to the jury or the jury don't see it, there's no evidence, So if you don't look and you only look at your day-to-day life, and if your kids are okay, and if they're getting a private ride in private school, and I'm not calling anybody out, I'm just saying, where is the empathy? You have no clue of what goes on with, little Johnny that's got to get up and fend for himself because mom is working, 2 or 3 jobs, and blah, blah, blah. So you should not be the person making the decision on something that you know nothing about. Now, I said that, and you can quote me on that. But, that's kind of, I think, a little bit of what we're dealing with. A lot of people don't really, this famous right now, Boots on the Ground, hottest song in South Carolina. You got a South Carolina 803 Fresh native. He made that song, and it's #1 still for a long time. And you're right. If you're not boots on the ground, just like Vietnam, won't get into that, but if you're not boots on the ground, then you don't know. And I think we need to get some people in office that will take the time to get to know what's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that bugs me the most is Henry McMaster's came out and, with the SNAP benefits, they issued a statement so that the South Carolina State Guard was going to be on scene. For me, it's all about optics. If you want to portray the National State Guard and the state militia as being a I guess, a warm feeling, then you don't take a nationally recognized sheriff and dress him up as a character for what was an oppressive state militia here in South Carolina, especially during the late 50s, 60s into the 70s, when it came to the racism and the bigotry of what the National Guard, not the National Guard, sorry, the state South Carolina state militia was used for, was suppression. And you took a sheriff that is the sheriff of Richland County, that is a considerably Democrat blue county, that represents a larger portion of the black population in South Carolina, and you dress him up as a character for the optics. It's for me, if a politician wants a message to come across a certain way, then use those optics to the success of what it is you're trying to do.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's one of the things. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, I get it. McMaster's would have them all dress up in Revolutionary Guard outfits if he could, because that's what he remembers from his early days. Well, so tell us a little bit about what's coming up in 2026. Also, I think Zach has a beef on, we never got Gigi Jackson on the show.
Oh my God. Let me text Gigi right now. I don't know. Did they play last night?
I know the Hawks did. Hawks had a pretty high scoring game last night. That was kind of fun to watch. They were playing Toronto
until about 11 o'clock, and I apologize for that. Well, I'll tell you the truth. The last time, believe it or not, the last show that I was on this show, we were actually smack dab in the middle of that fight. So it didn't start in a couple of weeks. I started questioning some things, how much, resources were left back in Kershaw County, because at the end of the day, just like you said, McMaster's, well, over here in Kershaw County, myself and my wife, we're kind of the face of the youth and whatnot. And so with that fight, this fight is been going on for a while. And when I say a fight, not us hating each other, but some intense discussions of what type of programs need to be funded once we raise the money, what type of programs need to be funded for that. So, and Gigi Jackson did do another event. We did it at Lou Goffels High School in July. I got the kids, we give the kids haircuts and makeovers, for the first day of school. So I apologize for that. It's been slammed to the wall since the last time I saw you guys. But
well, let me ask you some, as far as the conversations that you have with, let's say a Ralph Norman or potential candidates now that are running for governor, because I assume they have your attention as a community leader. You've got Alan Wilson and Mace Windu, not Mace Windu. What? Nancy Mace.
You
neither one related.
I was trying to mute my camera when he said, but go ahead.
Nancy Mace. When you have these conversations, do you genuinely feel like they have your attention, or does it feel like lip service?
The first two, yes. Just to be honest with you, Ralph and Jermaine are people that I can call on the cell phone. Jermaine actually came over. They were both invited. And to believe it or not, those two talk. They're kind of, I don't want to say best of friends, but, they're pretty cool with each other. But Jermaine came over. I called him and I told him, I said, hey, guy, wish you can come. We're getting ready to announce that we're breaking off from Boys and Girls Club of Kershaw County. And but we're getting the community involved with the new name and the new structure, what we're trying to do. And there was an event in Columbia with a lot of people there. And I told him, I said, it's probably, I know I have your support. It's probably best that you go to that event. And got a call early Friday morning about 6:30. And he just said, I kind of need to be with you. I know what you're going through. And I just think, I need to be there with you. And he did. He came. And so I have their ear. The last two, I don't know much about. I don't have any type of personal conversations with them. But I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't overly researched them. But if it's going to be more of the same,
yeah,
what we're going to get out of it,
Yeah.
So,
and I will speak for Jermaine. I call him Doc. But I can speak for him that I think he's outstanding.
yes.
I think that I think that as potentially as the governor of South Carolina, I think that he will be the type of governor that the state of South Carolina needs, even with all of the opposition. I think that the likelihood is that because he is so good at crossing the aisle to work with both parties to make things happen. He's such a good communicator. Plus, his interview on the Charlemagne the God show was fantastic. Yeah, and also I have to shout out to Bill and Dr. Jamil. Dr. Jermaine was fantastic on the Black, White, and Blue in the South podcast too. If you haven't listened to that episode, they cut through it, all of the things that Dr. Johnson has practiced. Like for Charlemagne, it was a very practiced interview. Those were answers that he's given time and time again. Man, with Black, White, and Blue in the South, it was unprepared, but it was a great interview, and Dr. Jermaine Johnson did a fantastic job. So, yeah, I sent him a couple pictures last week of I went to, and shout out Too Fat to Fly Stuffed Wings, who apparently are going to be coming back for Fridays coming up soon. I sent him a couple pictures of me and Corey and Ramon from the Too Fat to Fly truck. That was pretty cool. Tried to get him to come out to shake some hands with people in line, but Sundays are difficult. So.
Well, quick note with Jermaine. Jermaine and I, Jermaine is he's an actor, and he's been in a couple of movies, and we found out we crossed paths because in one of the movies he was in, they used my old gospel music, two of my tracks. It called me out the blue, and I didn't know anything about it, but the person that introduced me to the director, I trusted her, so I gave him a couple of tracks. And the funny thing about it is when he got the tracks, he liked the song, but he was actually probably a much better singer than I am, and he was an artist, and he wanted to redo one of my songs. And the funder said, "Oh no, we like the song the way it is, leave it alone." And Jermaine is actually in there, and I don't know if you ever, shared his story with you, but he has the story of knowing, what he's talking about as far as some of the things he's been through. On the other side of the aisle, too, like I said, I think sometimes people get caught up in the Republican and Democrats and they vote on certain policies. But as far as us, Ralph, on the other hand, just like Jermaine, have been big supporters of that teen center, and he still is. He's helped us out with some grant writers, and of course, it seems like every grant we run into, you're standing there wondering if this is the next one on the chopping blocks. Which amazes me that we have um, money for a lot of other things, and I'm not saying those things aren't important, but what about the least of these? That seems to be what you cut to get to another place, and is it good, better for the country? It remains to be seen. But those are the two that I have relationships with. Don't know the other two.
Alan Wilson and Nancy Mace. Alan Wilson is our current attorney general.
Right.
And,
I know he is. I just don't.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know that I have had his attention in the past because I have friends that work in his office that have apparently seen him watching videos of me tearing him apart. So
Okay. That kind of relationship.
there's a good possibility I'm on a list somewhere. I'm just going to tell him my name is Zach King and I live in Irmo, South Carolina.
Right.
Don't catch
Send me
these
a
hands.
letter. Yeah. Attention, Zach.
Well, what does 2026 look like for the Jackson Center?
So we did have that meeting, and we got the community involved. We had some of the local supporters, like fraternities, sororities. There were a few. Tim Scott sent a representative. We have a Democratic governor here. Well, he was Democrat. Vincent Sheheen, and we had a lot of support of county council there. We talked about what could we do, what name, because we wanted to keep the history of Jackson in the name, and we worked. Then we did a few talking with the kids, and we came up. So the new name as of January 1st is the Jackson Leadership Academy. Jackson, we kept the name in there, and Academy is the memory of Mather Academy, which is the next property over. And there's a ton of history with both of those schools, excuse me, and what they went through and that kind of thing. So we want the children to have a sense of the past, number one, so that we don't repeat it. You know, I think in some cases now we're repeating things because people are only looking at the headlines and won't read the story. And the things that we're trying to do versus what we were allowed to do in other situations is that we want to help fix the problems that we're dealing with. Right now, first of all, I love, you guys, when you're on the phone, what's the first thing we're talking about? Sports. I was an ex-football player, and I tell people this, and only football players understand this on high school football. Said I love Friday night when you're looking for a victory, and Saturday morning when you found it, because we all find the victory in the barbershop. If he'd had just did this, or if he had done that, we could have won. But all that is hindsight, and so sports are very important, but they're also very dominant in the state of South Carolina. So what happens to this great athlete that he graduates is either not qualified to go to college or not interested. Some people just don't want to go. And I have for years tried to put the things that were taken out of the high school. When I was in high school, a lot older than you guys, but when I was in high school, man, you had shop. I never will forget Mr. Hamer, machine shop. You had home economics, and we prepared kids then. So if you decided that you're not going to college, that your high school is your last game or whatever the case may be, at least you have some opportunities to get a real career job,
Right.
I don't knock restaurants or whatever. My daughter worked her way with McDonald's all the way through Coastal Carolina. She actually worked at McDonald's for high school to coastal. So she did 8 years at McDonald's, and she's now, working Department of DSS. And she's, very successful in her career. So I don't knock those types of jobs, but it's a career mindset that if it looks like a job, that's all it's going to be in a youth mind. As soon as something exciting happens, there's a big ball game or there's a Sunfront beach trip. I know this because we've hired some of them. But to get to go into a career, we're working with auto mechanics. We have an HVAC trainer. I want to prepare those students that decide that, no, I'm not going to go to college, but you can leave out of here, possibly do a year or two at Central Carolina Community College, which is one of our partners. But coming out of high school, and you're jumping into $20, $25 an hour type of job, in my opinion. Okay, now you're always going to have people that they're just going to be drawn to trouble or mischief or whatever. But the kid that comes out of high school, 18 years old, now all of a sudden you're bringing on a decent check. You don't have your own place yet. You're still living with mom or dad or grandma, whoever, but you're bringing home enough of a check that you can help be a part of the solution in that house. It will then, in my opinion, now the child has a choice to make. Okay, you're making a pretty decent piece of money without looking over your shoulder. Do you really want to go back or go to a life of crime and give up what you already have? To do that. And I believe that they probably, and for the most part, won't do it. I mean, we have a Canty Foundation. Shout out to Canty. We have several students with no college degree. One student, I got to call him, wish him prayers. He had a bad accident, Carlo Radden, and he's a supervisor in his 20s over older men, working over there at Canty. They were given an opportunity. And like I said, shout out to companies like Canty. I don't know if it's Canty Foundation, but anyway, I know Canty is right. And these guys, I'm not worried one bit that they're to pick up or someone called me and said that they're on the wrong side of the tracks. So that was one of the things that I was pushing because of the things that the reality, and here's the part where I get kicked off of shows, where some of the situations, I mean, if we're going to be real, let's just be real about it. It's statistically shown that African-American children are treated harsher in same situation crimes in high school and things like that than some other children. And we just got to deal with it. Let's just look at it. And I know some amazing teachers. I work with some amazing principals. Our superintendent over here is a stand-up guy, and I know there are people fighting it, but I'm talking about collectively in our country. And if you begin to discourage them that early, we got to figure a way to pick them back up and let them know that they are a part of this society. And you're really going to have to make a choice. Are you going to be on this part? Are you going to be a part of the solution? Or are you going to be a part of the problem? Of what we're doing. So, we're trying to put that in front of the kids and rebuild. Now, trust me, we're still going to push college. We still have a great relationship with Coastal Carolina, University of South Carolina. We want you to go to college. But what we don't want is for you to go to college at a situation to where you come home with $150,000 of debt.
Right.
And you got this piece of paper. And when I taught this class one time, another one that gets me kicked off the shows, and my titles in my classes was Back to the Hood. So we talk about situations, what makes a person say hood? What do you see? Of course, we see, kids say liquor stores. They see this and that, poverty and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm going to ask you a question. Is it a system that you take the brightest young person out of that environment and he or she goes to college, does everything right, whatever the case may be, and then graduate college, and within 6 months, now your student loan bill's on your credit. You probably don't have anything but that, and it's bad. I know of a student that was left Coastal Carolina, one of ours, and was turned down for a vice president's job in the bank because it had already hit his or her credit. Then they end up going back home and back to the same environment. So now you're just, educated. That's easy to me to discourage anybody that you've done and you played this game just like we said, the American way, the American dream. But there's things in society that roadblocks that. Somebody said, well, education should be free. No, I disagree with that. But what I think that we should talk about, number one, a longer term. Give a kid a chance. You just graduated. You just had 4 or 5 grueling years of college. Trust me, I have my little problems in some of my classes in college, but you're the first couple of months you're schooled out. You're not going to grab your career job the first couple of months. Give them a chance, to get themselves together before you go and slapping stuff on their credit. And that's kind of one of the issues we deal with.
Well, and you did say you disagree with education or I guess university being free. That's something. I am of the mindset that if a university like the University of South Carolina is taking in millions and millions of dollars in taxes, they receive millions and millions of dollars from the state. This is a publicly funded university. I am of the belief that university, you can charge for books, you can charge for room and board, but at least make the tuition affordable, because students wanting to go to University of South Carolina now are looking at if they go for 4 years, they're walking out with $120,000 in debt because tuition, room and board, they can't. If you're taking a full load of classes, you can't get a job. Or you could, but it's going to be part-time and it's not going to provide.
Let me clarify that. It shouldn't be free, but I'm not talking about students now.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm saying is that professors, they have to be paid. So, and you're right. If you're in a situation where you're making tons of millions of dollars from state tax credits and all the things that come with that, then that's the part I'm talking about. As far as students, even if not free, it's gotta be affordable, man. Our college, I remember in 1984, was it A&T? I think that was going to be one of my final choices. University of A&T in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I think it was like $3,500 for the whole year. And heck, you're great. You're doing good if you can get your books now for $3,500. And we sit there and we put enormous. Now we're talking about the financial side of it, but then we put the enormous pressure of you performing, being the best in your class, and I think we got to look at what we're where I commend some of the countries that I read about that have free education. I'm saying basically the professors can't teach for free, and
Right.
the people that are
No, completely agree.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I think we gotta revamp. We gotta take another look at from the student standpoint.
Just based on my research alone, the relationship between the universities and the loan organization, the banks, and the ability for the federal government to just continue to allow for the expansion of how much money is available, because there's correlating data that if you have a loan, if you have Fannie Mae that can continue to increase the amount of money that they have available for students to take out, then there's correlating data that says the universities get to charge more. So Fannie Mae increases how much is available, the universities increases how much it's going to cost. And that to me is part of what's gotten out of hand with the education system post graduation from high school. So
Right. And then the question is, for what you're adding in your fees, is that reasonable of what type of job that
Yeah.
child could find
completely
to
agree.
match the fee? So whereas you're raising Fannie Mae and then you're raising the fees, somewhere in there should be but we can prove now that students are making X amount of dollars,
Right.
to match what you just taught them,
Right.
And I think it definitely needs some sitting down at the table. and having a conversation.
Politician wants my vote. They can propose a change to the education loan system that if the loan was used explicitly for tuition and books, not room and board, not meal plans, nothing like that, but if it was just tuition and to books for school, then those loans should be interest free. So eliminating the interest.
Let's use South Carolina or any SEC school sports wise. The SEC alone last year was around, each school got $52.6 million. Just from the SEC. That doesn't count your NCAA, your bowl payouts, any of the other things that you could be. So a sliver of that, and I'm talking the slightest sliver, would be substantial to go towards the educational part of the college that you are a part of.
Well, the thing about
Insane.
it is too, are you willing to invest in the youth of America? Are you willing to invest? You got some bright kids that are nowhere near a college because they couldn't afford it. And that might have been a kid that helped cure cancer or help build a car. Of course, if you build a car that can run on water, you'll probably get missing, but they
That happened.
Absolutely. I thought about that because I was reading that story last night.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's just some people, if we produce the make sure that the people that deserve it and want it are actually having an opportunity to get out and serve in this country, I think we can go a long way opposed to just putting roadblocks. There's no way in the world we should be discussing us as grown men here, and we're discussing because there's a problem breakup somewhere that a child that fight through enormous amount of pressure and who knows what other stuff. We didn't even talk about the stuff that's going on at home, because that was one of the things we found in the research was that a lot of the abuse that people don't count as abuse were the negative things that were said at home. And the kid in my story that had to go end up living with his mother, and the first thing he said was the one in that book. The first thing he said was, "Then I moved in with mom, and nothing was right.
Yeah.
You'll never be nothing." And he started hearing those things, and then it brought back. He said, "Well, maybe my dad was right." He said because he would always say, "She doesn't care anything about you." So I'm looking at this story, and he's fighting two different worlds, a mom and a dad who got together at one time or another. And now they have totally, totally different views about, life and whatever. And then he went on to try to make himself laugh. And then he said, speaking of that, my mind playing tricks on me. Old song from the Ghetto Boys, an old rap song. And he kind of, I figured out that's how he pulled himself out of that depression state. But we got to look, now you look at all of that. And now we're talking about the next phase in your life. You asked me about the next phase of Jackson Leadership Academy. The next phase they have to do is like coming out of high school, and we're already talking about $100,000-$200,000 problem when they're not prepared to face, So, and again, that's my opinion. And I think that the politicians that will sit down and listen to the people will make a pretty good governor. Not just be on TV, not just get an endorsement by somebody who you think is powerful, whatever the case may be, but to talk to the people of South Carolina. We're just talking. We're talking about just basic problems. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican. There's a problem when a kid is leaving college with upwards of $150,000, $200,000 of debt before you even start your life.
Yeah.
Not to mention rent, car payments. Now, I read something the other day. The average car payment now is $865 a month. More than rent. But then if you don't get something of that, a new car or whatever, then do you have reliable transportation that you can make it to this job back and forth? That kind of. So it's a lot of things that somebody needs to sit down and listen and talk to the common person.
And you mentioned rent. I mean, we are literally on the verge of being in what is going to be one of the worst housing crises that we've ever seen, because even in new home developments, the new homes, 7 out of 10 of these new homes that are being built are already being purchased by rental companies that are going to put those houses up for rent. So out of 10 homes, only 3 of them are potentially going to be available for sale. You are going to spend more money in renting a home than you are in owning in purchasing a home. There's just, like, I know I get those letters in the mail, I get those phone calls, people offering exorbitant, just ridiculous amounts for what my home is to buy it, and they're just going to turn it into a rental property.
Correct. Yeah.
That is something that I can't believe that the state of South Carolina is not at least trying to step into to try and curb that, because they want to encourage people to move to South Carolina. We want businesses. We want people to move here, but we don't have the homes available. We aren't even building apartment buildings at a rate fast enough to accommodate for the people that want to move to South Carolina.
Correct. So, yeah. And you're absolutely right. If you look up, there's an artist, a gospel artist, and he's been nominated, I think, for a Grammy, but I know he's won a few Stellar Awards. It's called D. Morton and Gifted. A brilliant young man. I mean, he can play any instrument, and he's one of our partners in the new Jackson Leadership Academy and Gifted University. And we're putting the music back in, because I still believe that music is the universal language. But he is going through just what you said. Just he and his wife, and he has a young son, and they want to purchase, but it's limited, and what they have. They spent last week here, looking around, and pretty much all they could find are rentals. Or if you find the houses that are being sold, I mean, the prices are crazy. I got a call from my mortgage company, say, "Oh, hey, you can get $100,000 today," and I said, "And then what?"
Yeah.
She said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Then what?" Because money is made to be spent. Most people say, "Oh, you can save, invest." No, you don't. Most people spend it. Okay, I'm going to spend your $100,000. Then I fall back into your trap of this crazy interest rate, and then I'm not going to say I can't afford it, but I don't want to be a slave to no house. I'll be a slave to the house with the rates that they're charging people now. They'll tell you, I'm looking at some of the rentals and houses that are small, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and they'll say $2,200, and I'm like, Jesus, but anyways, now you can't tell anybody what to charge for a piece of property that they own. But you're right. I think we should look at.
We used to be able to. We used to have regulations. We used to have legitimate committees and groups that would look at the data and acknowledge what the prices of something should be. And then our government would create regulations to protect the consumers. And we've abandoned all intelligence. And I don't want to transition too quickly out of it because we only have a couple minutes. But I just want to ask on you guys' 2026 bingo card, did you have destabilization of the Western Hemisphere by kidnapping the president of another country? Anybody? Did you get to mark that one off?
You were going, Zach?
It was on my bingo card somewhere at this point, I guess.
Yeah, I actually wanted this. Today is the first day I've had to get back and to really research into some things. I'm really curious at what I may find out about that.
I can tell you this morning, Colombia is mounting a force, an armed force on the border with Venezuela, because there is a void, and this is what happens when the United States or other countries play a role in how a foreign government operates. And I'm not saying Maduro's a good guy.
Right.
Definitely not. I mean, he checks off all of the dictator, checklist.
Right. Yeah.
He came to power through populist movement. He held power by eliminating or arresting his opposition. So he's, he also has created an economy that is on the verge of collapse. One of the Venezuelan, the country of Venezuela sits on top of what is considered to be the largest verified oil deposits available on the planet, more than Saudi Arabia or any of the Middle East, more than Canada. Like, this is legitimately a country that should be doing very, very well. Has outside of China, has some of the most valuable rare earth metals and resources available. And yet he has destabilized that country to the point of collapse. So
it's for the oil, right? So timeline wise, I might be a little off on it, but Exxon owned like a lot of that oil in Venezuela for a long time. Then the government, basically it was screwing Venezuela to begin with. Same boat that they're doing now. Then they had a dictator, and George Bush Sr. had backed Maria Mercado or whatever her name was. Her name might be completely wrong. To overthrow the government and get back in there. It didn't happen. So she had to leave. She still, who was talking to Trump, offered her Nobel Peace Prize in honor of him or whatever.
Yeah.
And so basically the world trades oil on the US dollar. And there's these other offshoots of oil that countries that may start trading not in American dollars for oil. Doesn't bode well for America. So go get that stockpile of it. This is all about oil.
Right.
So,
well, the thing about it is that I think one of the dangerous things is, and this is Brian's opinion. I can't go to my neighbor house and tell them what they need to do with their garage door or whatever the case may be, whether I agree or disagree with it. Now, if you have to move a dictator, that's happened in history. But the question is that concerns me is that, how, even on the world stage, I know it's not going to look good that we go in and as Americans and we police this country and that's going to turn that fight into what Zach just said. It'll be an oil fight, and it won't be a fight about human rights or anything like that. And I'm, definitely concerned will the people of Venezuela be okay? Will they be able to live in peace as much as possible in their country? I'm going to spend some time on that today. I want to just research it because I know when we get back to school and making a conversation, that's going to be a topic, and I want to be prepared for it. But what do you guys think? I mean, what do you think is going to happen in the next?
Here's my concern over what happens with Venezuela is that the United States, Donald Trump and his administration, has now left a void of power in Venezuela. And if the United States doesn't act quickly enough to try and stabilize that situation, whether the vice president comes in and we create a very specific relationship with the country of Venezuela, I'm fine with that. I think that Venezuela could probably benefit from, legitimate democracy. I think the people of Venezuela have spoken out fairly often enough about their desire to have a democratically representative government and allow for sharing of that wealth. And that's another thing that comes down to it, is that, this greed is what creates these situations. But if we don't, we're going to see a China or an Iran wind up trying to stabilize Venezuela for their benefit. And if things don't get settled within the next couple of weeks, my fear is that China's going to see what we did in Venezuela, and they're going to go after Taiwan. And Donald Trump has already said, I don't give a shit about the people of Taiwan. They can all die. I'm paraphrasing, but he doesn't give a crap about Taiwan. So China takes Taiwan. Our 7th Fleet moves out. We're no longer there. North Korea attacks South Korea. I don't know what sort of a role we would play in that. I can't guarantee that we wouldn't pull out from there. China now, North Korea takes South Korea, and we see Israel attack Iran. It's, what we have is just several just burning fires, and we're going to all from one desire for greed and oil.
That's the other thing that I was thinking last night. Like I said, we got down to Myrtle Beach, and my wife and I both picked up a wicked cold, and we were trying to nurse ourselves. So I'll read for a little bit, then I doze off, that kind of thing. I think one of the concerns has to be what you just said. Will this become the way of doing business? Like we talked about the rentals in South Carolina. Well, that's now the way they do business. Will this become the way of doing business if you don't like a particular leader? And again, we all know, what this guy is or was or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, will that be the way of business that another country say, well, we don't like your guy, and we're gonna remove him? And you're right, there'll be so many different different players on the world stage, and then who gets to police whom?
Right.
Who gets to say that he's a bad guy? And I'm not talking about this guy. I'm just talking about someone else. Could be someone else. Yeah, because even in America, there's never, I don't care what nobody says, there's never been a president where 100% of the American people love them. It's not going to happen. So you're going to always have somebody that disagrees. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few days. Unfortunately, I am in the big, I'm still, I thank God we were able to get some of our partners back as far as grants and things like that. But I'm going to be so concentrating on making sure that the Jackson Leadership Academy remains open and remains a safe place. We still feed the homeless in the community free every Sunday. You come by, and we don't just hand you a bag of food. You sit down at a table, decorated nice in our dining hall, and we have dinner. We don't even call it, we just call it dinner for the community. Last week, we had Christmas there, and each one of the people had their name, and they were able to go under the tree and get them something. It's kind of a sense of family. So I have so much stuff that we have to deal with. Like I said, I know the kids are going to want to talk about this, but right now the biggest thing is to keep the place open. I think not just Jackson, there are a lot of places that I think people running for governor or whatever, maybe it's local city council, they gotta start taking into consideration to fix the problems that are on the ground in your community. And then, then we can kind of worry about what's going on the world stage. But you can't ignore it because it's on
24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, donations. Can people make donations to the Jackson Leadership Academy in order to help you guys out?
Actually, absolutely. And I'll send you that link. We're putting that together. We're putting some fundraising, having a lot of fundraisers and things like this. Mostly, of course, we need the money, but then we also, it'll be about the awareness, of because I think people, they'll look at it and say, "Oh wow, you guys send over 600 kids to college. That's just a number, 600." But when you start seeing the name, we'll put a name behind it. We'll tell you, we're very transparent with our information. And I think people will see the importance of why a place like Jackson should remain open, and stop. I'm not saying, like I said, once again, I hadn't overly researched the situation in Minnesota where they said they went to this place and the daycare and there were no children there. First of all, I'm very curious as to how you got millions and millions of dollars in a grant because I research grants all the time. So I'm not saying that's true or false or what's going on there, but that's what plastered the news, and they'll take programs like ours and there's so many other great programs in South Carolina and in the United States. And like I said, that gets buried. That's not controversial enough.
Right.
To do it. I'm gonna say this, and this will be the last thing that gets you canceled. Getting the show canceled.
Taking a lot so far.
There is a situation, and I'm going to try to tell you this story without bringing any names up. So when I first took on the position of director of this program, we were very new. We didn't know what was going on. We had a young lady that her business, they wanted to rent one of our classrooms. And the classroom was $250 a month, but she had to pay in cash, which I was totally against. And I went to the quote unquote powers that be. So I think it's dangerous that we're accepting cash in and blah, blah, blah. There was not a line item for it. So at that time, executive director said, well, we'll just put the money in the safe and we'll figure out what to do with it. Because at that time, we were charging like $5 a month. It was a very small amount of money. So the petty cash money was never full. Well, this particular person made an accusation, $250, right? That how do I know that they're not pocketing my money? Yeah, you're right. We're going to the Bahamas on your $250. But that's not even the issue. The
Maybe
issue is that
96.
nobody told me anything. They asked me to come over to the main office in Columbia. I get over there, I sit around, you got people all around the table, and they just start up the question, what day did she bring the money? I'm like, ho, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And it turned into an interrogation over $250. And to the point that I said, you know what? I don't play games like this. I took the keys and tossed them. You keep your 250, keep your business, because this is all bull. And I said a couple of things, went outside, called my wife. I said, I'm done with these people. I don't do business like this. And before I can get to the car, you had all the board members and, we ended up talking it out. Now, why did I tell you that story? Friend of mine, he said, Brian, I promise you, he's a good friend of mine. Go to my house, I go to his house. He happens to be white, I'm black. And he said, we're just trying to keep, this is kind of stuff CNN will get their hands on. $250, right? I said, okay. Now, fast forward 11 years later, we're talking of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Millions.
That was supposed to be used, that I raised.
Okay.
In this county, to be used in this county. And that's when the discrepancies and it started being meetings and blah, blah, blah. And there was a lot that I wasn't able to use for the purpose of what I raised the money for. And this same person is still a friend of mine. And I asked him the question and I said, we have to be careful of what we teach our children. And he said, what do you mean? I said, because when I had my situation, you, my friend, mentioned CNN, and that's $250. And now we're dealing with, tens of thousands. And I've yet to hear you mention CNN about the other person or WLTX or anything, So I say that to not accuse anybody or whatever the case may be. When I told this, and he's a friend of mine, and when I told him what happened, because I asked him, do you remember what you said at the table? He said, no, I'm sure you're going to tell me. I said, you got dang right, I'm going to tell you. You mentioned CNN, okay? This situation, you said you wanted to give this other person an opportunity to explain themselves. And I'm your friend. We go to each other's houses and you didn't give me an opportunity. And I said, and this is what people are talking about. So going all the way back to our country, whereas some people get the benefit of the doubt to explain themselves. And I asked him, I said, so we've made some tremendous progress with making a conversation. When we first started making a conversation, there was 35 African-American young men in that class, myself And at that time, it was the sheriff before Sheriff Lee Bone. And we walked into class, and the first question we asked was, how many of you would run if you see the police? Every hand went up. Every hand went up. But if you go to make it a conversation now, you'll see law enforcement and children having lunch together, interacting. You could tell it's not staged. And I said, we've made all of these strides for trying to heal, at least here in Kershaw County. That's what making a conversation is about. Let's talk about it, whatever. We've made all of these strides to try to heal. And I said, but then when there's something that just because this wasn't Brian Mays' money, this money was for the children of Kershaw County. I said, why don't you come and teach the next class and explain to them that some have to abide by the rules and others get the benefit of the doubt. So
Right.
I hope I said that without accusing anyone, but because there's some stuff that's going on now from the legal side. But that was just a true and honest situation of what we're dealing with. We have to be very, very careful of telling the kids what's right and telling them do this, do that. And trust me, I have white and black and brown and blue and green, whatever you call it, and we're one family. When those 200 kids come every day, we're one family, and we face some of the same problems every single day. And we're there. We even have a room. My wife just, I'm not going to say the name because I mess it up every time, but it's the partnership with Sand Hills Medical. I just say the reset room where you had a day. You can go in there by yourself, nice jazz music playing, sit on the beanbag chair. We even have, every Thursday, we have counselors from Sand Hills Medical Foundation that a kid can have someone to talk to, because we should be ashamed of ourselves as the men and women of this country. And we're putting that much pressure on young people, not only the cyberbullying, Gigi Jackson is big anti-bullying things and all of this stuff they go through. And we tell them, great, do this, do that, do this, and do that. And then they do everything right. I don't want them to run into situations like I did, And when I told my friend that, I said, that's the problem. This happened in 2014. You didn't even remember what you said.
Yeah.
But I remembered it because I'm I people say forget about it. We had an intense conversation with another person that made the comment about slavery. So you never been a slave, and I never been a slave owner. So you should just forget about it. I said, well, let me ask you this question. Okay, if a woman gets raped, okay, and she goes through the trauma, the mental anguish of all of that, I said, who am I to tell her she should forget about it? Okay. If you're not the victim, even if you're not the person that did it, if you're not the victim, that never should be your answer. I
Right.
tell people all the time, I'm sorry that went on, but, I'm sorry you went through that. I said, it's a better way to answer that. A very popular preacher that I used to love, I won't call his name, I'll make another mess. He's a national preacher out of Texas. And I would get up religiously to watch his podcast because I thought he was a great teacher. And he made that one statement, I got the answer to slavery. Get over it. And I said, well, obviously you need to come to my course about generational wealth. Then you can understand why certain people can't get over it, because when you can't set the stage and put a certain person on the 10-yard line, you running a 100-yard dash, and then you got to start at the beginning. So if you got to rebake, you can't just take the icing off the cake if the cake is nasty. You got to rebake the whole cake. So since we can't rebake the whole cake, we should never be in a position to tell somebody to get over anything. And that's white, black, whoever has gone through something. But the thing has to be, brother, man, Zach, I'm sorry you went through that, man. Look, all I want to do is be here for you. We can discuss slavery all day. We can also discuss how slavery is now, to me, in the prison system, which is one of the things that we want to talk about with our students about prison reform. Whoever's running for office, and people need to understand before they talk, before they make an opinion on something that you can't fix or whatever, let me just be there for my brother, or let me just be there for my sister, and let me just be the listening ear. I don't have the solution. None of us do. What are you going to do about slavery? Now, we took the kids up on a college trip. We took them to Presbyterian College to the beautiful Western Carolina, which I think is one of the most beautiful campuses in the world, with the mountains and everything. And then we went over to the Trail of Tears. How can I tell someone, an ancestor, or, to forget about it? You can't. No, I just want to be your brother, man. Hey, man, if you want to shed a tear now, I'm right here with you. And that is one of the biggest reasons that I love shouting out my wife, because she has an amazing connection with these young ladies, especially, the guys too, but mostly the young ladies. And I kid her all the time, because they'll get on these calls where everybody's on the Zoom, and it's like her and a bunch of these young ladies. And I'm like, y'all sound like a bunch of college roommates. She's just there, and they're having conversation, possibly healing a situation. And I think that's what we're forgetting as public servants. I can't count myself in there because I serve the public, but that goes all the way up to the governor, the president of the United States, everything. We got to remember the people that we're serving.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I am hoping that 2026 is going to be a year of enlightenment for lots of people. And as long as we keep talking about the truth and telling people exactly what it is that we see as being wrong, not necessarily we're trying to tell somebody that they should see it as wrong as well, but just expressing the benefits of how if people will allow themselves to be enlightened to what the truth is, that I think that we can make 2026 a better year. Well,
Absolutely.
Brian, absolutely. Thank you very much for being on the show with us this week. Our first episode of 2026. And absolutely, I hope all the success, of course, for the Jackson Leadership Academy. Like I said, send me that link and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes for people to be able to make donations. We'll get Gigi Jackson on the show. We'll work.
Yeah, we'll definitely get him. And you got to meet him. I mean, he's still the kid. He just, we went to Lugoff Elgin High School this year, and that was the first gym that he got his first dunk. And of course, so it was a big deal in the papers there, and he actually dunked one more time there. But he definitely is. He's still shy a bit. But I don't even know that he knows the positive work that he's doing, that he's using his platform as far as anti-bullying, because that first day of school, trying to send everybody looking nice and at least for the first day is so important. So his family as well, his mom and his dad, they're just a great set of people. They've gone through a bad tragedy, with who was very close to Gigi. They were like that, their nephew that was killed in an automobile accident, and they're actually still feeling the effects of that. So I call every, at least every week to check on them to make sure, especially with him playing now, just to make sure they're okay. But we got to get him for you.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. We would definitely accept them. Well, Brian, thank you very much for being on the show this week. Again, the Jackson Leadership Academy in Kershaw County. We'll have more information about everything anybody can do for that. Zach, thank you very much for being here this morning. Happy New Year to both of you. And I hope that we see a better year this year for everybody, rather than just
just a few. Correct.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Links to our past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, social media are available on our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And if you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly and you're in the giving mood, why not become an official Nothinger and support the show? Members get early access to this episode as well as exclusive content. Visit members.theallaboutnothing.com, or you can find a link on our webpage. You can also give us a one-time donation through the same link. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533, or you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com. or join our Discord server, links found on our webpage. Also, check out all of the podcasts available on Big Media, Black, White, Blue in the South, with Dr. Jamil and Bill Kemmler. You can also check out the ladies over at Politically Speaking, Erica, Emily, and Kirsten, as well as Ami's podcast, Welcome to Wonderland, and Preach Jacobs, who hosts the Preach Jacobs podcast. as well as our own The Awakening podcast talking about trauma in religion and escaping that trauma. So check out all those shows. Till then, everybody, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe, be kind, and
keep your hands to yourself.
The All About Nothing podcast is a product of Big Media and produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow everything Cake the band at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff the producer for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the producer. You can follow me across social media by visiting Linktree/Barrett Gruber. And you can follow Zach King on Linktree/AANZach. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and become a member. There are several tiers available that give you early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. To find links to our social media, podcast platforms, and merchandise to support the show, as well as past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email theshow@theallaboutnothing.com, or you can call our number and leave a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our sister shows. What the Pod Was That with Carrie, Zach, and myself. Welcome to Wonderland with Ami. Politically Speaking with Erica, Kirsten, and Emily. And Black, White, and Blue in the South with Dr. Jameel Brooks and Bill Kimmler. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and punch that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and hear us next week. The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media, LLC. Copyright 2026.